Weekly agendas. So the weekly agenda, there's some things we want in it. We want to give some good news. We want you to come into this thing in the right mental capacity. Start with some positive news. And it might feel forced. It doesn't matter. Start with positive news. If you don't have any positive business news, have some positive personal news. But start with positive news. Next thing is go through your numbers. We don't want you going through the KPIs you do daily should be different than the KPIs you do weekly. You don't want to be redundant here. You want to, maybe the ones you wouldn't want to get into every day because you only have 15 minutes, you get into more in depth here during the 10 minutes. But these are not the numbers you go into the quarterly either. They're more, what do we need to talk about weekly? So be very specific about this. Think about what would I want to look at weekly? What's relevant weekly? What's impactful? That's probably a more important word, weekly. And don't put things in there that aren't going to be impactful. Once you do that, we want customer and employee feedback every single week. So if you're doing at least one start-stop that week, you can bring that to this meeting. So if you schedule start-stops throughout the year, so every week you know there's at least one, then customer feedback. The bases, maybe you find a way to collect weekly feedback every week about what customers say. If you come into this meeting and you don't have new customer feedback, you don't know what's going on. It's just that simple. Customer feedback, obviously, you'll do big feedback pushes and get data once a quarter or once a year, however often corporate does it. But you need to develop some way to know what's going on a weekly basis with not all your customers. It could be just one customer, but you got to know, or else you're not in touch with your base. And then once you've done all that, then we get into the collective intelligence. This is the problem solving. And then once you're done with that, you go in the who, what, when summary. Now, the collective intelligence here is only 30 minutes because this is expecting a 60-minute meeting. I will tell you, I recommend that you go with the 90-minute option. Usually this problem solving or doing the OODA loop stuff takes about 60 minutes to really get any kind of value, to get 2 or 3 done. So I would recommend doing 90-minute meetings so you have 60 minutes for this. Timekeepers as well. And then at the end, who, what, when. Record it and hold people accountable. In fact, one of your priorities and numbers back here should be reviewing last week's who, what, when. If I was running that meeting with you, if we were doing it together, I'd make sure we said, okay, what did we say last week? Who, what, when? Did it get done? If it's done right, this 90-minute meeting should solve several other meetings during the week. Because you're just going to solve problems, get things done, communicate, and be done. It won't solve all your meetings, but it'll solve quite a few of them. Right? Oh, and then there's the one phrase close. This is a YPO thing, taken off YPO. It's just, what's the one phrase you use to close this meeting? Excited about the future, on track. So Richard Kay had a company called OTG Software. He ended up selling it, but Vern based what he considers the best practice off of Richard. And what Richard would do is he'd come in on Monday and he'd have his council meeting Monday morning. So he had by the way, he had 600 employees, business very similar to your size. So he would have every week on Monday morning, he'd come in, do breakfast with his council. So these were 2 or 3 select people. It wasn't the entire leadership team. In fact, 1 or 2 of them were usually not leadership people. And he would talk about what's going on in the business, not like the daily stuff. I mean, in the business, in their world, trends. Just like what's going to happen next with software? What should we be developing? Just really high level stuff. Then he'd go, that's outside of anything we even talked about. This is that council meeting. Then he'd go and he'd do his weekly leadership meeting. And that would be 1 hour to an hour and a half. And that was 8 to, say, 9 or 8 to 9:30. Then he'd go from that to his sales meeting. And the entire leadership team would go to the sales meeting. The whole sales team would come in. The leadership team would just be in listen mode only because they needed to hear what was going on. And the sales team would have their meeting from 9:30 to 10:30. Then 10:30, in would come the marketing team. Same thing. The whole entire leadership team would wait for that. I'm not saying you should do this. I'm telling you how he did it, just for the record. And they would listen. And then once that half-hour meeting was done, at 10 o'clock, operations would come in. And this was the developers and development team. And they do an hour-long meeting about operations. The whole leadership team stayed. By 11 o'clock, everybody knew everything. They would leave. They usually would schedule flights at 1 o'clock Monday, and they'd go off, and they'd do 3 or 4 days of work. And him and the leadership team would come back on Friday, check in, do it again the next week. And they ran that business, only being in the office Monday morning. And they grew it to over 600 employees. I think they sold it for $1 billion or something like that. just being there on Monday mornings. Now, this may not be realistic for you, but this is an idea of rolling weekly meetings. You don't have to do this. I can tell you it can be quite powerful, though. And you're like, oh, my goodness, the leadership team, the CFO, and operations people are all going to sit through sales and marketing? That sounds like a waste of time. It wasn't for them. They got everybody on the same page in 4 hours. I did the same or similar. I didn't do the same. I did similar in my business, and it was incredible how powerful it was. My CFO didn't miss a beat in the business because that person sat in those meetings and knew everything that was going on. We never had any financial questions. This is not to pick on Nate, just to say that one person, operations, same. So HR, same as well.